Hello, listeners. It's Gunter Swoboda here with some exciting news. We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspire Change with Gunter. If your organization cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self development, and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspire Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked number one in Australia and number 5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spiegner Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host. I'm a psychologist, I'm an author, content creator, researcher, and sometimes in a busy week I run across the problem of not exactly being sure about what I want to put out there into the said ether. That, not only aligns with making good men great, but also has relevance, not just to men, but women, leaders, content creators, all based on the idea of inspiring constructive change. So I was reflecting on my journey over the last few years. And what occurred to me is a couple of ironies, because I'm watching a lot of my friends winding down their careers, and it's certainly not what I've been doing, for better or worse. My view is it's for the better. I think my GP thinks I'm a lunatic, but, be that as it may, I need to do what I need to do. So, having had a fairly significant medical crisis in my late 60s, I decided that I was going to ramp things up a little bit rather than ramp them down. And Lauren, my wife, also thinks that I'm a little bit nuts. But as always, she fully supports me in whatever I do, which I completely and totally appreciate. So what does the actual picture look like that I'm talking about? Well, you basically take on a whole new research degree. You commit to writing more books. You look at becoming part of a significant academic research project. And as always, in the background, my practice is ticking over. Okay? So what's the message here? Well, there is a word of caution, and that is you need to be very clear about where you are at mentally, physically, socially, and spiritually. To me, my work is deeply, deeply connected to the person that I aspire to be, to the person I want to be. So it's not just psychologically important. It's not just about purpose and meaning in the sort of humanistic existential sense. But it's, to me, spiritually important, because my belief is that each and every one of us who commits to creating change in their life, and if it's for the better, will have that resonate within their environment. And often the case is that it also resonates about the environment. Instead of owners of things, we become stewards. And in that context, we allow ourselves to relinquish the concept of acquisition for acquisition's sake. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, I like nice things. Like my watch broke, so I bought another one, which was significantly more expensive than the previous one. But it has a whole bunch of stuff on it that I find I would really use. So there's a utility in it. And in this case, I am hoping that it's going to last the same length of time that the previous one did, which was over 5 years. So to me, in our technology age, that's a fairly long stretch. It's a bit like I apply the same principle to our cars. So at this stage, the other part of the lesson is that if you tick the boxes and you have something that is important to you, something that's meaningful, and you haven't done it, seriously think about doing it. My wife gave a talk last night at the Story Room Global, and the topic was throwing caution to the wind. Now, for her, apart from, writing a fiction book with me, but she did a majority, in many respects, of the work, throwing caution to the wind was getting up and speaking to a room full of strangers about something that's personal. She is brilliant when it comes to speaking academically about therapy, about philosophy, about work. But when it comes down to being, that open to strangers about her personal experience, she gets stressed and anxious. And having said that, she did, as always, a brilliant job. So let me recap. If you need to, throw caution to the wind. Sometimes we need certain elements in our life to come together to make certain things more meaningful. I always had this, trivial sort of comment about why am I not an academic? And I go, well, because essentially I like doing, and and I enjoy, and I'm good at what I do clinically. I'm a good therapist. I don't need to be an academic. Well, in the 6 weeks of reflecting on my life and where it's going, I came to the conclusion that I'm bullshitting myself. That it actually is something that I haven't achieved, but I want to. Do I need to do it? No, I don't need to do it, but I want to do it. It's part of my idea of leaving a legacy. Making good men great, to me, is a model, a framework, and a movement that goes beyond me. Hopefully at some point someone else is going to step in and begin to operate with the same framework. And one way of making that happen is to actually get involved in the society, in the community of thought leaders, of academics, of researchers. I'm speaking about this too from the lens that our culture has become, by and large, very anti-intellectual. In a lot of areas, certainly in Australia, a good intellectual conversation is about the financial markets, real estate, and sport. Now, don't get me wrong, I think those things are important. But without the overarching framework of why those things are important and what the downsides are to our hyper-focus on these things, we are going to lose the plot, and it's coming out. I'm seeing our society become vulnerable to the assault of the ultra right wing, the fascist thinkers out there, who, by the way, are strongly anti-intellectual. They don't want to know about that, because if you learn how to think critically, you will see through the bullshit that they disseminate within the media. And I mean, they've got a massive platform on which to play. And it's taken care of by significant amounts of money. You know, if you want to really get a handle on where a lot of this destabilisation of democracy comes from, follow the money. It's blatantly obvious where it's coming from. And, you know, when I watch and follow the various medias, I keep going, you know, how come, you know, for example, like Russia isn't going completely broke? I mean, they have to have exhibited themselves as probably the worst military in modern history. There was a glimpse of it in Afghanistan, but the whole debacle with the Ukraine is staggering. And there is no rethinking this. That Putin's government is only too happy to sacrifice the next 2 generations, ultimately, of well-being of his citizens, because he treats them like he owns them. There is no sense of, you know, let's consult here. It is his egocentricity, his malignant Machiavellian narcissism that encapsulates a deep-seated belief of his almost divine right to use and manipulate and sacrifice human beings on the battlefield and then also at home. Now, where else do we see that sort of behaviour? Well, we're clearly seeing it in a place like the United States, where universities are assaulted with a demand that they cannot teach anything that is against the current regime. And I use the word regime deliberately. You know, he was voted in essentially by a minority of people, but pretends it's the collective, the whole of the United States, who has voted him in and ordained him as president. The delusion that rests within that defies reason and logic, but it also shows that there is a deliberate intent to disregard human principles, humanistic principles, ethics, common sense. He was quite right when he made the comment about, I can go into Times Square and shoot someone and I wouldn't lose a vote. Now, that might be not the case these days. He's really pushing things to a limit. But we do need to come together if we want our secular democracies to survive. You know, we have situations where on the one hand, we're chastising Israel for genocide, yet on the other hand, the same countries that are complaining about this are selling the Israelis arms. Now, if that is not, like, crazy, I don't know what is. It is the epitome of hypocrisy. And when governments are that hypocritical, we have a very, very serious problem of not just no accountability, but no shame, no guilt. We have had a Prime Minister in Australia who initiated probably one of the worst programs in the world called Robo-Debt, and he's walking around freely. He and his henchmen should have been in jail. And there's lots of journalists who will agree with my position. But again, we come back to this lack of accountability. If I look at society as a team, which it should be, we should have a high level of cooperation so that we can trust each other. We should be getting better in dealing with conflict constructively. We should have a commitment to the principles of the separation between church and state and the rule of law, irrespective on which side of the fence you sit in, Parliament on. We should then hold ourselves accountable, not just to performance, and at the moment, all that seems to matter is how well, the country is doing economically, where I could say, well, the top end of town is doing brilliantly, but the lower end of town is suffering. People holding down 2 jobs, but they can't afford rent, let alone often food. So, that level of accountability is lacking. It's been undermined, eroded by neoliberal economics, by, catchphrases like, oh, there'll be a trickle down if we just free up the corporations to do whatever they like. The market will regulate itself. The market never regulates itself. It actually, when a market is dysregulated, it leads to depression, a fiscal depression. So we need to do a retake. We need to educate ourselves, and we need to put our education into action to be able to not just critically analyse things, because a talk fits all very well unless it leads to action. We need it to lead to action, the right action. We need to take a very clear look at the stuff that we're being sold by the tech end of town. AI is going to be brilliant. Smartphones are really good for us. Well, they came out at a time where no one could make a statement about what sort of effect this was going to have on society. But it's becoming clearer, and the story is not a positive one. People are arguing that, children's and adolescents' anxieties are not necessarily related to smartphones and social media or device use. Well, it just seems to be a little suspicious that it's now worse than what it ever has been, and we've only had smartphones for just over 10 years, really. So there's got to be some relationship there, and it's not just correlation. I would venture there's a strong part of causation. When I was teaching, I would tell my students, basically, don't type on the computer, handwrite. Why? Because it integrates better into your memory. Now, sometime later, because I was teaching in the early 90s, there was research that supported that. Now, I came from a place of common sense. It just seemed logical to me that if you involve body and mind, you get a better result. If it's just the body doing it and the brain's on holiday, not a lot's going to happen. And I have students who've come to me and said, I put what you taught us into practice, and then I tried out the other way, and what you teach is solid. Even in therapy, one of the things that makes a difference, especially in areas like trauma, anxiety, attachment, and so on, is the first signal we get in our state of distress is somatic. The body gives us the clue. So then we move on into the conscious and even subconscious realm to put the pieces together and create new meanings around that. This is not, in some respects, rocket science. It comes from a critical, analytical place. And yes, I'm all for scientific methodology, but I'm also very interested in the connection between understanding lived experience thematically as a narrative and how that can be teased further into empirical research. And so very, very few elements are actually necessarily analysed from that angle. It's getting a bit better in some areas, but not so good in other areas. I find it really interesting that there's only a handful of people in medicine that I see who do that. There tends to be almost the expert bias in that. That is, because I've had all this training, I don't listen necessarily to my patients. I was on the front end of that when I had my medical crisis. I experienced it firsthand. It made me furious. I was told that they're not interested in whether my hospital stay, that they wanted to extend ad nauseum, was actually stressing me out. I'm thinking, well, that's a bit peculiar, because I thought you're in the game of healing. Part of healing is the process of reducing stress. That's why we have informed consent. That's why we educate people about what's going to happen, why it's going to happen, and what they can expect. Now, yes, there's going to be individual differences, but an informed person about their condition who feels trust in their clinician is going to do better than those who don't. And where does that trust come from? By me as a clinician working together with my client, or in medical terms, my patient. It is the days have gone where my status within a community gives me some sort of magical power that people just simply go along with. We have now the problem where people have become cynical about the system so that they forget why we have vaccinations, for example. Because they go, they're bad. I'm using a shorthand here. And so what we, again, running into is that ignorance is driving us to the potential level where we could get extinct simply because we're stupid enough not to educate ourselves. And yes, you may go, he's angry. No, I'm passionate. There's a difference. I do experience frustration and anger, but basically, and most importantly, I'm passionate about stuff. And I want to inject that passion into others. Get passionate. Get up there. And I'm so pleased to see voices of discontent rising again. I grew up in the 70s. We were on Greenpeace marches. We were against whaling. We, took stand against nuclear armament. Made a difference. But then we got usurped by neoliberalism, which just wanted us to be good little cogs in the machine that were productive, irrespective of whether it was healthy or not. Secular democracy, which is probably inadvertently the best model we got to date that's going to keep a society relatively healthy, better than in anything else, requires passion and action. And we need to safeguard it. It is the heart and soul of a strong, connected community. And on that note, I'm going to sign off. So if you take anything out of this, take the lesson that there is always something to do, cast caution to the wind. Throw yourself into it. But make sure that when you do that, you're ticking the boxes physically, emotionally, and in your relationships. It shouldn't come at a massive cost to those. So until next time, stay inspiring, stay inspired, and spread the word. So, one more thing is that I really want to share about the fact that we have 2 books out now. Actually, one really, the other one's coming, of which I'm very, very proud. The first one is Amulets of Power, a Brian Poole mystery, which was written by me and my wife, Lauren Josephson. It's a story that's character-driven about the length of memory of power and the cost of conviction about, what if magic meets the science technological age of today? So if you enjoy a mystery with moral stakes and a real atmosphere, this belongs on your nightstand. The other one is, I'm flagging that right now, is Making Good Men Great, Surfing a New Masculinity, the second edition, which is also by myself and my wife, Lauren. And essentially, it's a practical guide to purpose, relationships, and leadership. And there's some clear practices in that you can start from the moment you get the book. Put it on your desk and use it. And not only will you change, but we will create a community change if we pull this together. So until next time, this is me signing off.
Hello, and welcome to all our listeners. This week, we take a look at our global listeners list, and we've seen a huge spike in listeners in South America. And we want to see this week's gratitude go out to our listeners in South America and the country of Brazil. What we have seen is amazing, as suddenly everyone in these Brazilian cities have shot Brazil's place from number 18 to number 3 on our global listeners list. What a feat! Congratulations! And so a special thanks to our listeners in the cities of São Paulo, Goias, Minas Gerais, Rio Grande Du Sul, Federal District, Paraná, Rio de Janeiro, and Santa Catarina for tuning in and inspiring positive social change. I, Devonna Prinzi, the co-executive producer, and our showrunner, Miranda Spigner-Sapone, sincerely thank you and ask that you please take the time to like, follow, subscribe, and share as your efforts make a difference to everyone here at Inspire Change with Gunter. And please remember, if you want to share your story of social change, feel free to reach out to the show directly. Please see the show notes for our contact information, but most importantly, keep inspiring positive social change.
Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.